I sat at my desk, watching my phone light up with an unfamiliar number. The area code was from Silicon Valley. My heart didn't race. I'd been waiting for this call for 3 months. Hello, this is Sarah Chen speaking. Ms. Chen, this is Robert Martinez from Tech Venture Capital. I'm calling regarding David Chen, who listed you as a professional reference for our Chief Technology Officer position. Do you have a few minutes to speak? I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Me at 28, receiving my doctorate in computer science, the same doctorate my brother David had tried to steal in my previous life. In that life, this photo never existed. In that life, I died at 23, broken and penniless, believing I was worthless. I have all the time in the world, Mr. Martinez, I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. Please ask me anything you'd like to know about David Chen. I could hear him settling in, the rustle of papers, the confidence of a man who expected a glowing recommendation for a candidate who had made it to the final round. David had been so careful, so meticulous in his new life. He'd moved to a different city, crafted a flawless resume, charmed everyone at Tech Venture. He just made one fatal miscalculation. He thought I'd never talk. He thought I was still that broken girl he'd destroyed. He was wrong. In my first life, I died on a cold February night, 23 years old, drowning in a bathtub in a motel room that cost $40 a night. The coroner ruled it a suicide. My family didn't contest it. Why would they? I'd always been the failure, the burden, the one who couldn't do anything right, but I didn't kill myself. My brother David killed me just as surely as if he'd held my head under the water himself. It started when we were children. I was the eldest by 2 years, the daughter my parents had first before the one-child policy was loosened. They'd wanted a son, they got me. When David was born, their disappointment in me crystallized into something harder, colder. He was the golden boy, the brilliant son who would carry on the family name. I was just the girl who'd come first by accident. I didn't mind, not at first. I loved my baby brother. I taught him to read, helped him with his homework, defended him from bullies. When he showed an interest in computers, I used my saved allowance to buy him programming books. When he got into the best high school in our district, I tutored him every night to keep his grades up. When he applied to universities, I wrote his entrance essays. I didn't realize I was creating my own executioner. I was smart, smarter than David, though no one wanted to admit it. I'd been coding since I was 10, had won regional competitions, had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. But my parents refused to let me go. America was too far, they said. Too expensive, they lied. What they meant was, you're a girl, and we need you here to take care of your brother. So I went to the local university instead, studying computer science while living at home, cooking meals, doing laundry, making sure David had everything he needed for his own college applications. He got into Stanford. My parents somehow found the money for that. I should have seen it then, should have understood what my life would be. But I was still naive, still believed that family meant something, that love was unconditional, that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, they'd finally see me. After I graduated top of my class, I got a job at a small but innovative tech startup. The pay was modest, but I was passionate about the work. We were developing a revolutionary artificial intelligence framework, something that could change how machines learned and adapted. I poured my soul into that code, working 16-hour days, sleeping at the office. Then David graduated from Stanford and came home. He'd failed to land any of the prestigious positions he'd interviewed for. His grades were mediocre, his social skills worse. The golden boy had tarnished, and my parents were frantic. All their investment, all their hopes, and their son was unemployed, living in their basement, playing video games. Sarah, my mother said one evening, her voice dripping with that particular tone that meant I had no choice. David needs your help. What kind of help? I asked, though I already knew. I always knew. Your company is hiring, aren't they? You need to get your brother a job. I did. I recommended him, vouched for him, trained him personally. He joined my team as a junior developer. I covered for his mistakes, stayed late to fix his code, made him look good in every meeting, because that's what good sisters did. That's what daughters who wanted to be loved did. He repaid me by stealing everything. It happened slowly at first. He'd ask to see my code, claiming he wanted to learn. He'd request access to my project files for research. He'd sit in on my meetings with the CEO, taking notes, asking questions. I thought he was finally finding his footing, finally showing the brilliance everyone had always claimed he possessed. Then one Monday morning, I arrived at the office to find my access credentials revoked. There's been a restructuring, my manager told me, not meeting my eyes. The board has decided to take the project in a new direction. David will be taking over as lead developer. I stood there, numb, as he explained that my role was being reevaluated, that they'd be in touch about my future with the company, that I should go home for now. I went to my parents' house instead. David was there celebrating with champagne. They promoted me, he said, grinning. Lead developer, can you believe it? You stole my work, I whispered. His smile didn't falter. What work? You mean the project the company paid you to develop? That's not your work, sister. That's company property. I just pitched a better vision for it. You copied my code, my algorithms, my documentation, everything. And who's going to believe you? He leaned back supremely confident. You're the one who was just fired for poor performance. I'm the one they promoted. Face it, Sarah, you're just not as good as you thought you were. My mother touched my shoulder. You should be happy for your brother. This is a huge opportunity for him, for our family. He stole from me. Don't be dramatic, my father said, not looking up from his newspaper. David earned this promotion. Maybe if you'd worked harder, you'd still have a job. I left. I found a lawyer, tried to build a case. But David had been clever. He'd made sure all our code collaborations looked like his ideas with my implementation. He'd positioned himself as the visionary, me as merely the technician. The company's lawyers crushed mine. I didn't have the money for a prolonged legal battle. I found another job, a step down, less pay. David got a massive raise. The AI framework, my framework, launched to incredible success. Tech magazines called David a prodigy, a visionary. He gave interviews about his revolutionary ideas. Not once did he mention me. I tried to move on, tried to accept it, but David wasn't done. He'd been careless with company money, I discovered later. Had embezzled funds to support his lifestyle, to pay off gambling debts. When the auditors started circling, he needed a scapegoat. He chose me. Somehow, the trail led to my accounts. My credentials had been used for the fraudulent transactions, my signatures on the documents. By the time I realized what was happening, the police were at my door. I was arrested, charged with embezzlement and wire fraud. David testified against me at the grand jury hearing, tears in his eyes, talking about how he'd trusted his sister, how betrayed he felt. My parents hired a lawyer for him to help him cope with the trauma of having a criminal sister. They didn't hire one for me. The prosecution offered a plea deal, plead guilty to reduced charges, serve 3 years, pay restitution. My overworked public defender advised me to take it. The evidence against me was overwhelming, he said. David's testimony was damning. I'd lose at trial and face 20 years, but I was innocent. I refused the deal. I lost at trial. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge gave me 15 years. I never made it to prison. The night before my sentencing, sitting in that bathtub in that motel room with a bottle of sleeping pills in my hand, I wasn't thinking about suicide. I was thinking about appeal strategies, about new evidence, about how I'd prove my innocence. But the pills weren't sleeping pills. They were something else, something that stopped my heart in minutes. David had visited me that afternoon, had hugged me, had slipped them into my bag along with a note in handwriting that looked like mine. I can't face what I've done. I realized what was happening. As the room started spinning, as my vision blurred, I tried to call for help, stumbled toward the door, collapsed. The last thing I saw was my phone, just out of reach, David's last text message on the screen. Sorry it came to this, sis, but you never knew when to quit. Then darkness, then light, then I was 7 years old again, waking up in my childhood bedroom, the morning of my first day of 2nd grade. The rebirth wasn't gentle. It wasn't a slow realization. I woke up with every memory intact, every betrayal fresh, and the crushing knowledge of what my life would become if I didn't change it. I was 7 years old in a body that could barely hold the rage of my 23-year-old self. I spent the first week in shock, barely functioning, convinced I was losing my mind, but the memories were too precise, too detailed. I knew things a 7-year-old couldn't know. I understood advanced mathematics, could code in languages that wouldn't be invented for years, remembered every conversation, every pivotal moment. And I remembered David, 5-year-old David who toddled into my room that first morning, asking me to help him tie his shoes. I looked at him, small, helpless, innocent, and had to leave the room before I did something I'd regret. He hadn't done anything yet. He was just a child. But I knew what he'd become, what he was capable of. I locked myself in the bathroom and made a plan. I couldn't change everything. Some things were too big, too systemic. My parents' favoritism was cultural, generational, bone deep. But I could change my path. I could protect myself. And when the time came, I could make sure David faced consequences for his choices. But I'd have to be patient. I'd have to be smart. And most importantly, I'd have to become someone they couldn't ignore, couldn't diminish, couldn't destroy. So I became exceptional. I stopped tutoring David. When my mother asked why, I said I needed to focus on my own studies. She frowned, but I'd already started bringing home perfect test scores, winning academic competitions. They couldn't complain about my grades. I taught myself advanced programming using library computers, making sure to document every project, every piece of code I wrote. I entered competitions under my own name, built a portfolio that was undeniably, individually mine. By the time I was 12, I had patents. By 15, I'd founded a small tech consulting business helping local companies with their websites and databases. I saved every penny, opened accounts my parents didn't know about, built a safety net they couldn't touch, and I watched David. Without me propping him up, his grades were average. He struggled with complex math, got frustrated with coding, preferred gaming to studying. My parents hired tutors, sent him to expensive test prep courses. Nothing worked. He was smart enough, but not brilliant, not special. The shift in my parents was subtle but devastating. Their disappointment in David grew as their surprise at my success deepened. They didn't love me more. I'd long since given up on that, but they couldn't ignore me anymore. I was making money, winning awards, getting featured in local news stories about youth entrepreneurs. When college applications came around, I got into MIT again. This time, I had enough scholarship and saved money to pay my own way. My parents couldn't stop me. "You're abandoning the family," my mother said. "I'm building my future," I replied. What about David? He needs you." "David needs to learn to stand on his own." He didn't get into Stanford this time. His grades weren't good enough without my essays, without my tutoring. He went to a state school. My parents were devastated. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something colder. Because I knew David's failures wouldn't humble him. They'd make him angrier, more desperate, more dangerous. I went to MIT and thrived. Got my bachelor's in 3 years, started my PhD immediately. Published papers that actually had my name on them. Built genuine relationships with professors who valued my work. I was careful, so careful, to document everything, to establish my intellectual property, to create a paper trail of my brilliance. And I waited. Because I knew David would try again. His nature hadn't changed. The circumstances had, but his fundamental character, the entitlement, the jealousy, the willingness to destroy others to get ahead, that was still there, waiting for the right trigger. After he graduated, he bounced between jobs, never quite succeeding, always blaming others. He burned bridges, made enemies, accumulated debt. My parents kept bailing him out, kept making excuses. Then, 3 years ago, when I was finishing my doctorate, he called me. "Sarah," he said, his voice careful, "I know we've grown apart, but I'm family. I'm trying to turn my life around. There's this startup in San Francisco that's looking for developers. Could you give me a recommendation?" Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. But I remembered my past life. Remembered that my refusal had driven him to more desperate measures. This time, I'd be smarter. "Sure," I said. "What's the company?" "Code Forward. They're doing interesting work in machine learning. I've been teaching myself, and I think I'd be a great fit." I wrote him a measured recommendation. Honest but positive, highlighting his potential while carefully avoiding any claims of exceptional skill. He got the job. I watched from a distance, checked in occasionally. David was doing okay, not great, but adequate. He'd grown up some, seemed to be taking his work seriously. Part of me wondered if maybe he'd changed, if maybe this life could be different. Then I got an email from a former colleague at Code Forward. Hey, Sarah, weird question, but did you and David collaborate on a project in grad school? He's been presenting this AI framework at company meetings, and it looks eerily similar to your dissertation research. My blood went cold. I requested copies of his presentations, my algorithms, my code, my ideas, all repackaged under his name. He'd been more careful this time, changing variable names, restructuring some functions, but it was undeniably my work. Work I'd published under my name, with timestamps and academic records proving provenance. He was doing it again. But this time, I wasn't powerless. This time, I had documentation, reputation, and resources. This time, I had proof. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell Code Forward. Instead, I watched and waited, documenting every presentation, every claim he made, building my case. Then he got greedy. He pitched my framework to Code Forward's executives as his own revolutionary idea. Claimed he'd been developing it for years. They loved it, gave him a bonus, put him in charge of a new division. He was so proud, called my parents to brag. They called me, hinted that maybe I should have worked harder, been more innovative like my brother. I let it play out. Let him get comfortable. Let him start believing his own lies. Then I filed a lawsuit. Intellectual property theft, fraud. My evidence was overwhelming. My published dissertation, my patent applications, my dated code repositories. Code Forward's lawyers took one look at my documentation and settled immediately. They fired David, blacklisted him in the industry, and paid me a substantial settlement. David was destroyed professionally. Every job application was rejected. Every interview cut short when background checks revealed the lawsuit. He was toxic in the tech industry, but he was still free, still able to reinvent himself, still dangerous. Then 6 months ago, I got a Google alert. David had updated his LinkedIn profile. New location, Palo Alto. New focus, venture capital and startup advising. He was positioning himself as a technology consultant, leveraging his years of experience in AI development. He was rewriting history again. I checked his profile carefully. He'd been clever, avoiding specific false claims while implying extensive success. His recommendations were from people who'd left Code Forward before the lawsuit who didn't know the full story. His resume highlighted his time as division head at Code Forward without mentioning how it ended, and listed under references Sarah Chen, PhD, former collaborator. He'd listed me as a reference. The audacity was stunning. Did he really think I'd lie for him? Or did he assume I'd be too polite to tell the truth? Maybe he thought I'd simply not answer, let the opportunity pass. He was counting on my silence. On the social contract that says you don't destroy someone's career prospects, even if they deserve it. He'd forgotten that he'd destroyed mine, that he'd stolen from me, that in another life he'd killed me. I didn't reach out to warn him, didn't give him a chance to remove my name. I just waited. And now, Robert Martinez from Tech Venture Capital was on the phone asking me about David Chen's qualifications for their Chief Technology Officer position. So, Ms. Chen, Robert Martinez said, let me start with the basics. How long have you known David? My entire life, I said pleasantly. David is my younger brother. There was a pause. Oh, he didn't mention that on his application. He just listed you as a professional reference. Yes, he tends to omit context when it's inconvenient. But you asked how long I've known him, and I want to be thorough in my answer. I appreciate that. Martinez sounded intrigued now. And you've worked with him professionally? Not directly, no, though he has attempted to claim credit for my work on several occasions. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, could you elaborate on that? Of course. Are you familiar with the Chen framework in adaptive machine learning? It was the subject of my doctoral dissertation at MIT, published in 2021 and subsequently patented under my name. I am, actually. That's part of why we're excited about David. He claims to have co-developed that framework. David claims many things, Mr. Martinez. That particular claim resulted in a lawsuit for intellectual property theft. Code Forward, his previous employer, settled out of court after reviewing my documentation. David was terminated for fraud. This is all a matter of public record. The case number is CV 2024-0847 in Santa Clara County Superior Court. I could hear typing. Fast, urgent typing. Ms. Chen, David's resume indicates he left Code Forward to pursue other opportunities. Yes, termination for fraud can technically be described as other opportunities, though it's somewhat misleading. Why would he list you as a reference if you were the plaintiff in a lawsuit against him? That's an excellent question. I've been asking myself the same thing. My best theory is that David believes I wouldn't be honest with you, that I'd either refuse to answer your call, which would be neutral and wouldn't necessarily harm his application, or that I'd be vague and diplomatic out of some sense of family loyalty. But you're choosing to be specific. I'm choosing to be truthful, Mr. Martinez. You're considering David for a C-suite position. You deserve to know exactly who you'd be hiring. I see. His voice had changed, become sharper, more focused. What else should I know? Where would you like me to start? His technical capabilities, his work ethic, his character, or his history of fraud? All of it, I smiled. This might take a while. I have time. I told him everything. I told him about David's academic record, the mediocre grades, the lack of independent achievement, the pattern of relying on others to cover for his deficiencies. I told him about Code Forward, about the systematic theft of my research, about the presentations where David claimed credit for work he couldn't possibly have done. I sent Martinez links to my published papers, my patent applications, the court filings. But Ms. Chen, Martinez interjected, David seems to have a strong understanding of the technology in question. Our technical team interviewed him extensively. He was able to discuss the framework in detail. Of course he can discuss it in detail, Mr. Martinez. He stole the entire project, including all my documentation and notes. He's had years to memorize my work, but ask him to innovate beyond it. Ask him to extend the framework in a new direction. Ask him to solve a problem that isn't already explained in my dissertation. You'll find him suddenly vague and uncertain. More typing. What about his other projects? He lists several successful initiatives on his resume. I'd be happy to go through them one by one. Do you have the list in front of you? For the next 20 minutes, I systematically dismantled David's resume. Every project, every accomplishment, every claim. Some were exaggerations of minor contributions. Some were outright fabrications. Some were stolen from colleagues who'd been too kind or too scared to confront him. I had documentation for all of it. Emails, source code comparisons, timestamps, testimony from mutual colleagues. I'd been preparing this for months, ever since I'd seen his LinkedIn update. Every piece of evidence carefully organized, easily accessible. This is extensive, Martinez said, sounding overwhelmed. David is extensively dishonest, Mr. Martinez. It takes a lot of evidence to properly document that. May I ask why you're telling me all this? If he's your brother, he is my brother, and he's a fraud, a thief, and, if I'm being completely honest, a dangerous person to have in any position of trust or authority. The fact that we share DNA doesn't obligate me to help him deceive you. But surely this will destroy any chance he has of getting hired. That's the idea, yes. Don't you feel guilty about that? I leaned back in my chair. Mr. Martinez, let me tell you what I feel guilty about. I feel guilty that I didn't warn Code Forward before they hired him because maybe I could have prevented other people from being hurt by his actions. I feel guilty that there are probably people earlier in his career that I don't know about who suffered from his theft and fraud, and I wasn't there to stop it. I feel guilty that I'm even having this conversation with you instead of having filed criminal charges years ago. Do I feel guilty about preventing you from hiring a fraudulent CTO who would likely steal from your portfolio companies, damage your reputation, and possibly commit actual crimes with your resources? No, Mr. Martinez. I don't feel even slightly guilty about that. There was a long silence. Is there anything else I should know? He finally asked. Actually, yes, there's one more thing. I pulled up a file on my computer. 6 months ago, David applied for a position at three other venture capital firms: Summit Ridge, Velocity Partners, and Horizon Capital. All three declined to interview him after the reference check phase. I wasn't listed as a reference for any of those applications, but I have contacts at all three firms who shared that they found significant discrepancies in his claims during background checks. So he's been rejected by your competitors. Your competitors recognized red flags without needing detailed information. I'm providing you that information freely because you were kind enough to call me. Consider it a professional courtesy. I appreciate that. Martinez cleared his throat. Ms. Chen, would you be willing to speak with our managing partners? I think they'd benefit from hearing this directly. Of course, I can make myself available anytime this week. I'll set that up. And Ms. Chen, thank you for your honesty. This could have ended very badly for us. You're welcome, Mr. Martinez. I hope you find an honest candidate. The startup community needs more integrity, not less. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at my phone. It was done. David's chance at Tech Venture was over before the managing partners even heard my full story. Martinez's tone had made that clear. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Because destroying one job opportunity wasn't enough. David would just move on, find another mark, tell new lies. The cycle would continue, unless I made sure everyone knew the truth. I opened my laptop and began typing. The blog post went live that evening. I published it on Medium under my own name with full documentation attached. On professional references, personal responsibility, and why I told the truth about my brother. I laid it all out. The theft, the fraud, the lawsuit. My evidence clear and incontrovertible. David's pattern of behavior across multiple jobs and years, and my reasoning for speaking up when he used me as a reference. I didn't make it a hit piece. I made it a case study in accountability. As someone who has been victimized by professional fraud, I wrote, I understand the instinct to stay silent, to avoid conflict, to hope that someone else will deal with the problem. But silence protects predators and punishes victims. When someone uses your name to commit fraud, whether they're your brother, your colleague, or a stranger, you have an ethical obligation to tell the truth. The post went viral within hours. Tech Twitter picked it up. Reddit threads analyzed every detail. LinkedIn exploded with debates about family loyalty versus professional ethics. My inbox flooded with messages. Some supportive, some angry, some sharing their own stories of having been victimized by fraudulent colleagues or family members. But the pattern was clear. The tech community was overwhelmingly on my side. By the next morning, David's LinkedIn profile was gone, his Twitter account deleted, his personal website offline. He was trying to disappear, to hide from the scrutiny. But the internet doesn't forget. Screenshots of his false claims circulated. Companies that had almost hired him sent me quiet thank you notes. Recruiters added his name to internal blacklists. My parents called 3 days after the post went live. My mother was crying. How could you do this to your brother, to your family? I told the truth, Mom. That's all I did. You've destroyed his life. No, David destroyed his own life by being a fraud. I just documented it. He's your brother. You're supposed to protect him. And what did he do for me, Mom? When he was stealing my work, ruining my reputation, trying to build his career on my achievements, where was the family loyalty then? That's different. You're successful. You don't need... I'm successful because I worked for it, because I earned it. David never did. And you never wanted to see that because it was easier to make me the problem. We gave him everything. We supported him. You gave him everything that was mine, Mom. My tutoring, my help, my accomplishments. You took from me to give to him, and when he squandered it all, you blamed me for not giving more. My father took the phone. Sarah, this vendetta needs to stop. You've made your point. This isn't a vendetta, Dad. This is consequence. Something David should have faced years ago. He's family. So am I, but that never seemed to matter. I hung up. They didn't call back. The real satisfaction came 2 weeks later. Martinez called again. Ms. Chen, I wanted to update you on the situation. After speaking with you and reviewing your documentation, we did additional digging into David's background. And we found evidence of financial irregularities at Code Forward that weren't part of the public lawsuit. Our forensic accountant believes David embezzled approximately $200,000 using fraudulent expense reports and vendor invoices. My heart rate picked up. Have you contacted Code Forward? We have. They'd apparently settled your lawsuit quickly to avoid publicity, but they'd kept the internal investigation files. They're reopening the case and working with law enforcement. Law enforcement? The amount exceeds the threshold for federal wire fraud charges. The FBI is involved now. I sat back processing this. I had no idea about the embezzlement. We wouldn't have found it if you hadn't prompted us to dig deeper. Your testimony about his pattern of fraud gave us reason to investigate beyond the resume discrepancies. What happens now? That's up to law enforcement and Code Forward, but David will likely face criminal charges. I wanted you to know that your honesty may have prevented him from doing this to another company, possibly our companies. After Martinez hung up, I allowed myself a moment of pure, undiluted satisfaction. David hadn't just lost a job opportunity. He was facing federal criminal investigation. The dominoes continued to fall. Code Forward issued a statement about their renewed investigation, mentioning the newly discovered evidence that had prompted it. Other companies David had worked for began their own audits. A pattern emerged, small thefts, cleverly hidden, adding up to substantial amounts. The State Bar Association began investigating David's claims of having consulted for several law firms on technology cases. He'd falsely implied legal credentials he didn't have, possibly practicing law without a license. The IRS got interested in his tax returns, which apparently hadn't included the income from his various frauds. Every lie unraveled, every theft exposed, every victim found their voice. My blog post had become a rallying point. Other people David had scammed came forward with their stories. A class action lawsuit formed. Media outlets picked up the story, not just tech media, but mainstream news. Tech Prodigy Exposed as Serial Fraud ran in major publications. David tried to fight back with a defamation lawsuit against me. His lawyer withdrew within a week after reviewing my evidence. The suit was dismissed with prejudice, and David was ordered to pay my legal fees. My parents mortgaged their house to pay for David's criminal defense attorney. I watched from a distance, feeling nothing. The trial took place 8 months after that initial phone call from Robert Martinez. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching David squirm as prosecutor after prosecutor presented evidence of his frauds. The courtroom was packed with his victims, former colleagues, employers, even a few investors he'd conned in side deals. He took the stand in his own defense, claimed he was misunderstood, that he'd made mistakes but meant no harm, said I was vindictive, jealous of his success, motivated by sibling rivalry. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Jennifer Huang. During cross-examination, she pulled up my Medium post on the courtroom screen. Mr. Chen, you claim your sister is lying about you out of jealousy, but isn't it true that Dr. Chen has a net worth approximately 10 times your own? That she's published over 30 peer-reviewed papers, holds multiple patents, and serves on the board of 2 major tech companies? That's not the point. Isn't it also true that when she discovered your theft of her research, she didn't immediately report you, but waited, documented your actions, and only came forward when you attempted to defraud another employer? She was plotting against me. Or was she giving you the opportunity to stop committing crimes? An opportunity you didn't take because you listed her as a reference, assuming she'd stay silent. David had no answer to that. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, falsification of records. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison, with restitution orders totaling over $1.2 million. My parents sat behind David, both crying. They looked at me once as the marshals led him away. I met their eyes steadily. Whatever they saw in my face made them look away first. 2 years have passed since David went to prison. My life has become something I never imagined in my first life. My research has revolutionized adaptive learning systems. My company, built on the framework David tried to steal, is valued at over $300 million. I've won awards, delivered keynote speeches, mentored dozens of young women in tech. I bought a house in Palo Alto with a view of the bay. I wake up every morning to sunlight and possibility, no longer haunted by the specter of betrayal and theft. I started a foundation for victims of intellectual property theft, providing legal assistance and documentation support. We've helped recover millions in stolen work, exposed hundreds of frauds. My Medium post became a handbook for whistleblowers in tech. My romantic life has flourished too, something I never had time for in my first life. I'm dating a professor from Berkeley who thinks my dedication to justice is sexy. We travel, laugh, build a life together. Sometimes I tell her about my brother, about what he did. She listens without judgment, holds my hand, reminds me that I'm not defined by his crimes. David writes me letters from prison. They're all the same. Apologies that ring hollow, justifications that make no sense, pleas for help I'll never grant. I don't respond. I keep them in a file, documentation of his continued refusal to take responsibility. My parents cut off contact after the trial. They couldn't forgive me for testifying, for not lying to protect him, for choosing justice over family loyalty. I grieved for a while, not for them, but for the parents I'd wished I'd had. Then I let it go. Some fantasies aren't worth holding on to. Last month, I got a letter from Robert Martinez. Tech Venture has become one of the most successful VC firms in the Valley. They credit their rigorous reference checking process, implemented after the David incident, with helping them avoid several potential disasters. "You didn't just save us from one bad hire," Martinez wrote. "You changed how we evaluate character and integrity. Thank you." I framed that letter, put it on my office wall, right next to my doctorate and my patent certificates. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I feel guilty about destroying my brother's life, sending him to prison, alienating my family. I tell them the truth. David destroyed his own life through his choices. I simply refuse to be complicit in his continued fraud. In my first life, my silence killed me. In this life, my voice saved hundreds of others from the same fate. That's not something to regret. That's something to celebrate. Today, I got an email notification. David's parole hearing is in 6 months. The victims in his cases have been invited to submit impact statements. I open a new document and begin to write. Not about forgiveness or reconciliation, not about family or second chances. I write about consequences, about justice, about the importance of holding people accountable regardless of blood relation. I write about a young woman who died believing she was worthless, whose death was ruled a suicide, whose family didn't fight for her. I write about being reborn with the knowledge that I had value, that I had power, that I deserved justice. I write about a phone call that changed everything, that gave me the opportunity to tell the truth without apology or equivocation. And I write about the future, not David's future in prison or eventual release, but the future I'm building for everyone who's been victimized by people like him. The future where speaking truth isn't seen as betrayal, but as bravery. The document grows longer, more detailed. I include statistics on recidivism for fraud convictions, psychological profiles of repeat offenders, studies on the ineffectiveness of early parole for financial crimes. By the time I finish, it's 20 pages long, evidence-based, thoroughly documented, irrefutable. I attach my CV, my publications list, my company information. I want the parole board to understand exactly who is speaking, exactly what authority I have on this subject. Then I write one final paragraph. David Chen has never taken genuine responsibility for his actions. He has never shown remorse beyond what might reduce his sentence. He has never acknowledged the real harm he caused, the lives he damaged, the trust he violated. He remains a danger to anyone who makes the mistake of believing his charm over his character. I strongly recommend that his parole be denied and that he serve his full sentence. The community he victimized deserves at least that much protection. I sign it, Dr. Sarah Chen, founder and CEO, Chen Technologies. Then I hit send. My phone rings. It's my girlfriend calling to confirm dinner plans. We're celebrating tonight. My company just closed a major funding round. We're expanding, hiring, building something meaningful. Ready to celebrate? She asks. I look at the sent email confirmation on my screen, at the framed letter from Martinez on my wall, at the view of the bay through my window. Always, I say. Because this life, the one I built through truth, justice, and refusing to stay silent, is worth celebrating every single day. I lived once in fear and silence, and it killed me. I'll never make that mistake again.